Değerli akademisyenler, öğrenciler ve misafirler, Başkent Üniversitesi Güzel Sanatlar, Tasarım ve Mimarlık Fakültesi tarafından düzenlenen 4. Uluslararası Sanat ve Tasarım Eğitimi Sempozyumuna hoş geldiniz. Zoom oturumumuz değerli konuşmacılarımız Padget ve Doktor Selçuk Gürışık sunumuyla başlayacak olup 10. oturumla devam edecektir. Davetli konuşmacılarımızın özgeçmişleri hakkında kısa bilgilendirme yapması için sözü Sayın Doktor Öğretim Üyesi Burcu Ay'a bırakıyorum. Buyurun hocam.
Merhaba. Merhaba. Ian Padget, Royal College of Art, Kasetsart University, Bangkok, Tayland'da misafir profesör olarak çalışmaktadır. İngiltere'de Bradford Regional College of Art'ta lisans eğitimi alıp 1969'da Royal College of Art London'da master derecesini tamamladıktan sonra kendisine endüstri destekli bir araştırma bursu teklif edildi. Tekstil endüstrisinde tasarımcı olarak 6 yıl geçirdikten sonra ilerleyen yıllarda Central St. Martin's College ve University of the Arts of London isimlerini almış. Central School of Art University bünyesinde bulunan dokuma tekstili dizaynı bölümü başkanlığı görevini yerine getirmiştir. Erken emekli olduktan sonra 2010 yılında Türkiye'de İstanbul Bilgi Üniversitesi bünyesinde moda tasarım lisans programını oluşturmaya davet edildi. Marmara Üniversitesi'nde çalışırken 2015 ITTC Uluslararası Konferans Komitesi'nin üyeliğini yapan Ian Padget, yazdığı kapsamlı akademik makalelerle Hülya Tezcan'ın son kitabı Bursa'nın İpeklerine de katkıda bulunmuştur. En son olarak yakın zamanda 1850-2020 dönemini kapsayan bir moda tekstil arşivi projesi başlattı. Ian Padget, Royal College of Art, is visiting professor at Kasetsart University, Bangkok, Thailand. He was educated in Britain at Bradford Regional College of Art and completed his master's degree at the Royal College of Art, London in 1969, after which he was offered an industry-sponsored research fellowship. After spending 6 years as a textile designer in the manufacturing industry, he took a post as head of woven textile design at Central School of Art and Design, London, which was later incorporated as Central St. Martin's College of Art and later into the University of the Arts, London. He was also writing academic papers, attending international conferences and supervising research degree students, with whom he pioneered practice-based art and design PhD research. Upon his early retirement, he was invited to create and establish the fashion design license program at Istanbul Bilgi University, occasioning his residency in Turkey in 2010. Whilst engaged at Marmara University, he was a member of the ITTC International Conference Committee 2015. Writing extensively academic papers, he was contributed to Hülya Tezcan's recent book, Silks of Bursa. Recently, he was embarked upon a fashion textiles archive project covering the period 1850 to 2020. Doktor Selçuk Gürışık, İngiltere, ABD ve Türkiye'deki yükseköğretim kurumlarında sanat ve tasarım disiplinlerinde eğitim programları yürütmektedir. Anadolu keçe yapımı ve çağdaş ürün tasarımlarıyla modernize edilen özgün yüzey tasarım tekniklerinin araştırma sonuçları Türk kültüründe belirli bir görsel dil oluşturmasına katkıda bulunmuştur. Giyilebilir sanat ve moda tasarım uygulamalarıyla sadece ticari tasarımcı olarak faaliyet göstermeyen Gürışık, müzecilik ve malzeme kültürü araştırma projelerinde de akademik çalışmalar yürütmektedir. Türk kültür antropolojisi ve maddi kültür alanında küratörlüğünü yaptığı ve tasarladığı sergileri British Museum ve Topkapı Sarayı müzelerinde gerçekleştirilmiştir. Ayrıca ZKM Center for Art and Media Culture New York'taki La Mama Performing Art ve University of the Arts London ile yapılan uluslararası işbirlikçi deneysel araştırma faaliyetleri çalışmalarının kabulünü arttırmaktadır. Elyaf Art, tasarım objeleri ve eserleri Selçuki Ali markası altında yün, ipek ve kaşmir gibi doğal ham maddeler kullanılarak el yapımı üretim süreçleriyle üretilmiştir. Çağdaş tasarım konularına yönelik çevre dostu, yavaş moda ve sıfır atık tasarımsal kavramlara yönelik çalışmaları yürütmek veya çözüm bulmak akademik çalışmalarının temel amaçlarını oluşturmaktadır. Sanat ve tasarım alanlarında ulusal ve uluslararası akademik çalışmalara halen katılmaktadır. Dr. Selçuk Gürışık has been lecturing in art and design subjects in higher education at UK, USA, and Turkey in universities. Outcomes of researching of Anatolian felt making and its indigenous surface decoration techniques modernized through contemporary product designs contributed to build up a specific visual vocabulary language in Turkish culture. These closely affiliated projects with British and Topkapı Palace museums were about commissioning and creating exhibitions in Turkish cultural anthropology and material culture. Fiber art design objects and artifacts have been produced under the label of Selçuk Ali by using natural raw materials such as wool, silk, and cashmere through handmade production processes. Conceptually dealing with eco-friendly, slow fashion, and zero-waste design aspects towards contemporary design issues, finding solutions or focusing attending have been main aim for his academic research work. He continues to participating throughout national and international academic works in art and design fields. Thank you very much.
Dr.
Değerli
Gürışık has
katkıları-
just arrived.
Sorry. First in
Gürışık has
Turkish,
just
I need
arrived.
to announce. Değerli katkıları için şimdiden teşekkürlerimizi sunuyor ve sözü Ian Padget ve Dr. Selçuk Gürışık'a bırakıyorum. Now I'm leaving words to our dear participants, speakers, my dear tutors.
Do you
May I
have your
start
PowerPoint?
presentation document? May I start presentation
Yes,
document?
please. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay.
Oh. That's better. That's better. Can you- Okay. First of all, we'd like to say thank you very much indeed for inviting us to attend the Internet Symposium. We're very pleased to do so. It's a subject which is close to our hearts. We have fairly positive attitudes towards the subject of the symposium, and we intend, in addition to speaking to some of our slides in the PowerPoint presentation, to have a conversation between the two of us regarding the particular issue that we are concerned about, which is, of course, practice-based art and design education. Okay, so if we can have the first slide, please. I wanted at the outset to draw our attention to another pandemic somewhat earlier on in human evolution, in fact, in the Middle Ages. And it was, to my mind, the most serious event which affected the human condition in the whole of history. Wanted to put our present pandemic into some kind of perspective. So this slide talks about the Black Death, which was the bubonic plague of the 1347 to 1351, which spread across Europe and caused an immense amount of damage. Next slide, please. This illustration really shows the severity of the pandemic and the disruption it caused. One of the significant impacts was the preoccupation with death. It's estimated that something between 75 and 200 million individuals died in that first pandemic in Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia. The disparity between 75 and 200 million is largely accounted for by estimates of how the pandemic spread across the rest of the world, which we must understand at the time was not documented because the communications and knowledge of the world at that time was very restricted. the severity was also caused by the total lack of any medical support, infrastructures, and the like, and consequently, people contracted the disease and died immediately. Unlike today's coronavirus, can we have the next slide, please? Which is really quite a minimal affair by contrast to the Black Death. To date, as we can see from the statistics, or rather as in March 2021, only 128 million, that is, contacted the disease, and that is by contrast to the 200 million, of course, who died from the disease. So in fact, today, although I don't want to minimize the importance and the sorrow and the anguish that the deaths have caused, there really are only today 2.8 million. This is globally, and this is verified statistics because we rely heavily on the World Health Organization, which we currently have in position as an international health monitoring body. Next slide, please. This just visualizes and gives us a new visual aesthetic, if you like, which is both digital and also gives a impression of how the virus is all around us and attacks the body, particularly the respiratory system. Next slide. The important thing which we want to focus on from the point of view of our particular interest, which is practice-based design and art education, is really a support for our notion that art and design is concerned with aesthetics, and aesthetics are concerned with the multi-sensory experience and evocation. And therefore, we have a couple of books which we would like to recommend. One is In the Mind's Eye, which is an expose by an author, an American author, Thomas West. It was written in the 1980s. It really looks at how creativity relates to multisensory experience and how the informing, fostering, nurturing of art and design beginners starts with the multisensory. Another book which we would like to recommend relates to pedagogy in art and design, and it is called Frames of Mind by Howard Gardner. Later on, there's a couple of references to two more books, which is multi-sensory learning and multiple intelligences, which is of course an issue for educators, and also his final book that we will recommend, Howard Gardner, which is about the 5 senses which are shifting our focus in education towards student-centered learning and towards the learning environment improvements. We regard the coronavirus and our responses in education to it, which are as much conditioned by our own interest in digital media as it is by government restrictions, which don't allow us to have face-to-face contact with our students. Next slide, please. These are 2 books for your reference and familiarity, and we would greatly recommend that you acquire them if you don't have them already, read them if you haven't already, and certainly spread the word that these are useful and important books. Next slide. We are, as we said, concerned primarily with creative practice, and we just wanted to make the statement at the moment that because of the current situation, we are teaching in the virtual and not in the real, and therefore we want to underscore the importance of craftsmanship and maintaining standards of craftsmanship, which is part of the educational requirement, the aims and objectives and goals. Next slide, please. At this point, I want to make an opportunity for my colleague Selçuk to make a contribution, because we want to stress that we're not expressing a view which is antagonistic to digital media. On the contrary, we would like to assure people that we are in favor of and embrace any new innovation which will help to communicate in our area.
Hello. These are some of my new designs for wall hangings created with digital media and digitalization. I'm not against, but while we're doing it, we shouldn't lose our other tactile quality and senses, and able to use our hands and fingers and tools. So all this multidisciplinary interaction make designer is completed, make designer is in front, forwarded, and more humane activities. Because as we know, designers are not happy with current situation. They like to see more and different and imagine towards their imagination. So I believe multidisciplinary attitude, which many art and design faculties are concerned about, under universities' roof, they're losing this activities and they are hopefully emphasize and go back into more practical research, and each and every exhibition is a kind of laboratory outcome and reports. So I believe not only for designers or art and design education, also as a whole culture, we should able to let people use tools and fingers and hands. So for the time being, I just want to say this.
Next slide.
Next slide.
It's important to, in this respect, to have a slightly historical perspective. In Friends of Mine, Gardner reminds us that there have been three major paradigm shifts in education, from the original form of knowledge and information transfer from teacher to student, which is the old atelier system, not formalized, certainly up until the Middle Ages, in an educational frame, but necessarily was the ancient method of teaching practice, which was the show and tell, the master and apprentice system. Next slide, please. I think that Selçuk may have something to say about this particular aspect also.
We can see in this slide, me and my assistant came from other discipline, which economy. He transferred his knowledge and know-how into design and making, designer maker attitude, and he had his diplomas in textile and fashion design. So I was thinking I should contribute by exchanging the flag to a younger and a new person, like my students, which I've been doing last about 30 years. So there is no one rule and there is no one way. But I was very lucky to educate it in very Bauhaus school type art colleges in England. And I able to do sculpture, painting, lithography, and all those other print facilities under the roof of my college. So I was up and down, here and there, and I was experimenting in many different, as my teacher said, aesthetic values of designing, making. So if this is a scope, if this is an angle, if this is an imagination, we should improve and progress and enlarge our students. We should behave accordingly, I believe.
Next slide, please. The important point that we want to make, and we fully acknowledge that we're living in a somewhat exceptional period of time, is that we mustn't lose sight of the necessity to fulfill all the requirements of an art and design education, particularly those aspects which are concerned with the making of commodities, products, prototypes, artworks, paintings, sculptures, and so on. Next slide. This again illustrates that the importance of craftsmanship can't be stressed enough. And we will mention in a moment the my particular interest, which is trend forecasting. Obviously, in my subject area, which is fashion and textiles, trend forecasting is very important and is a quasi-science these days, in as much as the predictions are researched and prepared by such people as economists, sociologists, and psychologists. Next slide. The pedagogy, which is, of course, as we know, the theory of teaching practice, has a set of constraints and parameters which relate to several different aspects of the student experience. It's important to recognize that university education, as much as any other form of education, is really about fostering independent learning. And the fostering of independent learning is now called student-centered learning, and therefore the new circumstances in which we find ourselves is inhibiting slightly this aspect, because necessarily we are all concerned with teacher input, which is largely information, presentation, and assignment setting. But of course, some of those assignments are limited because students do not have access to laboratories and ateliers, weaving sheds, spinning sheds in our case, the processes which are necessary to achieve a product. Next slide. The other side of the coin, of course, is the relationship which our products, the results of art design practice, have a relationship to culture at large, and the interaction with the general context within which we're all living, the time, the place, the geography, the cultural mores are all very important contributory aspects, and these are of course quite difficult to communicate and maintain in a tangible manner during this period. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is a fairly typical situation, although to some extent still a little rare because of social distancing. And we'll notice that we don't have face masks and the like. I couldn't find a picture which illustrated a up to the minute today kind of situation. But this is not uncommon. We're moving towards this classroom situation where videos and films and pre-recorded messages and images, but this is very definitely in the realm of the virtual, not in the realm of the real. Can we have the next slide, please? This is a conceptualized art impression of really what might be going on in the mind and imagination of the individuals who are receiving our rather tumultuous digital education and having a digital experience. It's estimated that 15 hours of most young people's time, daily routine, which 15 hours, which is a lot of time, is spent in front of the television or a laptop and not spent in the real world. Next slide, please. The importance of trend forecasts is quite significant here, because although my subject area is fashion, the information gathered, as I've said, is sociological, psychological, as well as technological and referring to change. So I summarized for you the forecasts which I was concerned with presenting by video conferencing through Zoom group earlier last year, July last year, 2020, to the Fashion Council in Bangkok. Next slide. Of abiding issues, of course, is sustainability. And there are many arguments about whether we go back to the future in the sense that craftsmanship and the handmade becomes of more significance and more importance as we progress, and that environmental issues are addressed. Next slide. The context within which people are forced to live at the moment are also encapsulated in these bullet points. We have written a fuller paper which will be made available, and of course this slide presentation will also be made available. I'm conscious of time, so I won't go through every single aspect, just if you can make a note for yourselves that these are some of the relevant issues. Next slide, please.
Çok özür dileyerek süreyi hatırlatmak istiyorum. Moderatör değilim ama Burcu Hocam.
Evet hocam, biraz geç başlamamızın da etkisi oldu ama sonuna yaklaşıyoruz. Çok az kaldı.
Arkadan söz almak istiyorum. Onu da hatırlatayım.
Tabii ki, tabii ki. Okay, we can...
Yes, of course. It's a dialogue.
Please, söz alabilirsiniz, söz hakkı alabilirsiniz. Buyurun.
Sonra.
After presentation, after.
Okay, let me speed through then. The biggest issue for many people, particularly environmentalists and those concerned with sustainability, of course, is waste. And I just thought I'd show these two slides. On the left, we've got the collection of plastic and rubbish. And we've also, on the right, we've got reconstituted yarns. These are yarns made from shredded plastics and recycled plastic into fibers for yarns. Next slide, please. What we really want to say about sustainability, and we have information in our paper and in the presentation, which is very, very important, is that we focus quite strongly on reduction. And the reduction of waste is very, very important. So we've got four R's and a U for you. Reduce, reclaim, recycle, repurpose, and upcycle. These are the key factors which will influence sustainability in the future. But further to this conclusion, if you are of the opinion which Selçuk and I think are of, the increasing role of craftsmanship is very, very important. I'll just give you a couple of points before I finish and then ask Selçuk if you want to say any more. Recently, Burberry, the international brand, disposed of, didn't recycle, didn't reclaim, didn't repurpose, didn't upgrade. What they did was destroy $3.5 million of surplus fashion items. Now, there is world overproduction of textiles, particularly, and thereby fashion items. Oversupply. This needs to be reduced. I'm not sure that burning it, incinerating it, or otherwise putting it into landfills is necessarily the answer. And therefore, we would urge all manufacturers with surplus, and first of all, not to make surplus, and in the second instance, to apply the 4 R's plus U to ensure that we have minimal waste and that we have a sustainable economy. Anything else to add?
Just a brief touch, an issue of tradition, gelenekselden güncele, from tradition past, contemporary, particularly a big culture we have in this geography, we should be concerned about. We don't have to reheat traditional activities and practices and put that aside as an outcome. We should create today's generations historical and important designs, because we are not going to leave anything behind from these days to future. That's all I wanted to say.
The importance of reducing our usage to refocusing our economies on quality and the handmade wherever possible. We should remember that before the Industrial Revolution, which is only 200 years old, and which in many parts of the world is not the norm in the acquisition of clothing, items, furniture, objects of many kinds. It's a particularly Western-dominated production process that in many other parts of the world, of course, the handmade still exists, and the handmade is possibly one way forward to the future. If there are any questions, if you wish to participate. That's our final
Any
step.
questions? Evet, sorularınız ve yorumlarınız varsa hocalarımıza yöneltebiliriz.
Benim sorum yok ama o küçük konuşmamı yapabilir miyim?
Tabii, buyurun hocam.
Well, first of all, dear Ian and Selçuk, we are very honored to see you here. We are very happy. Thank you very much for today. Simultane kendimi tercüme ederek gideceğim herkes için. Öncelikle Ian ve Selçuk'a teşekkür ederim bizimle burada bugün buluştukları için. This is a big crisis which we didn't accept. Our brains started to bring new solutions for everything, not only for art and textile, to live. Aslında gerçekten bu insanoğlunun beklemediği büyük bir kriz, değerli katılımcılar. Beyinlerimiz yeni çözümler üretmeye çalışıyor. Sadece sanat ve tasarım için değil ama yaşayabilmek için bu koşullarda. Museums, curators, artists, textile industry, economy are all trying to find new innovative solutions for showing art in a pandemic way. Özellikle sanatın, sanatçının her anlamda direkt olarak bu pandemiden ilk etkilenen birimler olduğunu hepimiz gördük. Ve bu birimler, müzeler, küratörler, sanatçılar, tekstil endüstri ve ekonomi bu olayı aşmak için herkes kendince bir çaba içinde. Again, we are all very much thank you for your here today. Teşekkür ediyorum katılımınız için. Ayrıca sadece Ian ve Selçuk için değil, bütün katılımcılara hoş geldiniz diyorum tekrar. Ben Tekstil ve Moda Tasarım Bölüm Başkanıyım. I'm Head of the Department, as you know. Kolay gelsin herkese. Tekrar hoş geldiniz. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Sizlere de kolay gelsin.
Sevgili hocalarım ve meslektaşlarım Ian Padget ve Selçuk Gürışık'a katılımlarından dolayı çok teşekkür ediyorum. My dear teachers and colleagues, Selçuk Gürışık and Ian Padget, thank you very much for your participation and giving to word moderator, new moderator to Özge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you so much for your presentation and participation again.
Birazdan
Thank you.